These are unprecedented times. The past 2 years have been some of the hardest to live with for most of us. We've watched our loved ones pass away, lost our sources of livelihood, and we've seen the world as we know it get flipped on its head. For those of us who have been lucky enough to still have something to do, tasks on our to-do list, goals that haven't been completely destroyed, we've lost the motivation to do anything. That drive and that passion that we had of crossing every single thing off our to-do list 2 years ago, for some of us, it's gone. And we're left staring at a blank screen in front of us and a list of all these unchecked to-dos by our side. We don't even write new to-dos anymore because the ones from yesterday, they are more than enough to fill today's pages. But as vaccines roll around and sanctions are lifted and added back on again, we might be wondering, when will life get back to normal? When will I get back to normal? And part of that is all about checking off those to-dos, even if you don't fully feel like it. So how do we take action on our goals when we don't have the motivation to? To figure this out, we first have to understand why. Why aren't we doing these things? For most people right now, it's a feeling of overwhelm. With everything that's going on in the world, with all the things that we can and we should and we want to do, it's easy to feel overwhelmed and anxious. The problems feel so large and all-consuming, and we feel so small in comparison. It's like we're gonna get swallowed up. And if you feel like this, I just wanna start by saying, it's okay to take a break. A break from work if you can, a break from social media, the internet, and definitely a break from the news. Now, I'm not saying you should totally cut yourself off from reality and live in ignorance, but humans were not designed to know everything that's going on in the entire world all at the same time. So forgive yourself if you can't keep up. Another thing to keep in mind is being kind and compassionate to yourself. Self-compassion is the best motivator for learning rather than self-shaming. Understand that it's okay to feel the way you do. Most of us do as well. And so if you can, take some time off before you take action to do things you enjoy, to pick up a new hobby, to try a new recipe, a new Skillshare class, or most importantly, just to rest and do nothing but play and be present. When you're less anxious and you feel no longer overwhelmed, you find a new set of eyes to look at that task with. You'd be surprised how well you do with this new perspective. If the reason that you're putting off the task is because you're feeling overwhelmed, there are a number of reasons why you just might be. And throughout the rest of this video, I'm gonna highlight all of those different reasons, as well as ways that we can combat those feelings and finally get started being consistent on our goals. One of the main reasons it seems that we don't want to do something is because the task itself is just not clear enough. And often when we write down our goals, we don't make them specific. We say things like, I want to be successful, without actually defining what does that mean? What are the steps that we need to take us there, that we want to take? And as a result, our brains find it difficult to decipher and figure out what actually needs to be done. And so we default back to doing nothing because it's safe and comfortable. All the other options are too confusing. And so next time you want to write a goal, try writing a SMART goal, or what we call a clear goal. I'm sure you've heard that 1,000 times before, but the reason you've heard it work is because it's broken down. It's specific. Your brain doesn't have to waste resources in trying to figure out what to do. It can simply go to work on taking action as soon as possible. And the other thing we want to identify is, how do we measure our goals? How do we know when we're making progress? Are we 10 steps away, 5 steps away, 3 steps away? And that in and of itself keeps us motivated to keep going. That when we look back and see how far we've been, how far we've come, it's not as difficult to convince ourselves to take the next step and the next step. And then looking at, is my goal achievable? Is it realistic? Do I actually think I can accomplish this? Can I get that dopamine hit that's gonna fuel me to keep going? And when you're trying to build habits, it's often encouraging to start with smaller iterations, to build, measure, learn, because the more you get done, the more you want to get done. It's like a cycle of momentum. And lastly, what's the timeline that you want to achieve this in? And this is why, for me, my Google Calendar is one of the most powerful productivity tools I own, and it's free. Most times when we think we are procrastinating, actually, we're not. And if we take a look at the dictionary definition of procrastination, what does it mean? It refers to the action of delaying or postponing something. And so think about it. Can you really postpone something that was never set a time and space in your diary in the first place? Blocking off a time, it makes us accountable. It helps us to see, this is what I'm going to do and when. And now we know what we should be doing at what time, we're more likely to actually do it. Sometimes we put off tasks because they just seem too cumbersome, so difficult that we would rather not do anything at all. Instead of looking at the challenge that seems insurmountable, we'd like to look at our feed, which is more comfortable. When people get to the top of Mount Everest, they might think, wow, how did I get here? And if they knew how difficult it would have been to get there, maybe they never would have made that journey in the first place. Because our brains love playing it safe. And if something is too difficult, we're most likely going to keep putting it off. So take a look at the to-do lists in your diary. Do they look difficult? And if the answer is yes, break them down into smaller chunks and pieces that are more manageable. Let's say you want to write a book. Instead of saying, write a book in your daily task, try saying, write 1,000 words every day, or write 30 minutes every day, or write about X topic every day for X amount of time. Simpler tasks are easier to process and take action on head on. And the truth is, more often than not, when we get started on these small tasks, it's easier to trigger this flow state where we enjoy doing so much more than we set out to do. However, we won't be able to get there unless we make that initial step a simpler one. And before we break that down, I want to talk to you about my new class on Skillshare and how you can enjoy it for free through today's sponsor of the video, Skillshare. As you know by now, Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes for creative and curious people. It's a great place for you to explore new skills, deepen your existing passions, and get lost in creativity. And one of those is my very own Inner Compass, which is a complete 6-lesson guide to help you amplify your motivation through a step-by-step sequence and guide on finding your purpose and then building habits to sustain that purpose. So if you're enjoying this video and you want help setting your new goals for the new year or just refreshing the ones you have, check out my class on Skillshare because it builds even further on all the things that I've been talking about today. Skillshare is curated specifically for learning, and so there's no ads to interrupt your focus, and they're always launching new premium classes by creators like me, but also many more, so that you can stay focused and follow your creativity wherever it takes you. The first 1,000 of my subscribers to click on the link in the description will get a special 1-month free trial of Skillshare so that you can start exploring your creativity today. So go check out Inner Compass for yourself using this free trial, which by the way, you can cancel anytime, and let me know what you think. Win-win. Eat a live frog first thing in the morning and nothing worse will happen to you for the rest of the day. These words were said by Mark Twain, and it's something that I strongly recommend and love living by. Research has shown that self-control can be a limited resource, depending on how you think about it. In one study, participants were exposed to 3 different situations and asked to exhibit some form of self-control in each of them. It was discovered that people had the least self-control in the third situation compared to the first. And this shows us that self-control, it looks like it's a limited resource that keeps depleting the more we bank on it and use it and rely on it throughout the day. The more situations that we are thrown into that require self-control, the less self-control we have. You have to use your willpower when it's at its peak, its strength is at its fullest. So start your day with the hardest thing. Not only will you have the best willpower, but you'll also be full of energy. And the two of these things will combine to give you a much better chance of finally getting things done, crossing things off your to-do list. Maya Angelou is one of the greatest American poets, authors, and civil rights activists. When asked how she was able to write so many great works, She said something really simple but powerful. I don't wait for a light bulb to go off in my head. She treats her creative work as they are, work. So every day she sets out to work and doesn't wait for inspiration. Most of the time, those of us who are in the creative industry tend to justify our procrastination by saying, I'm waiting for inspiration. The truth is, most of the time, that inspiration you're looking for only comes when you're at work, when you're in the flow state. And you can't get into that flow state without actually getting started. So instead of waiting for a light bulb to go off in your own head before you start working, act like Maya Angelou and treat that task like it's work, like there's a boss looking over your shoulder with a penalty if you don't get it done. Speaking of penalties, to jolt yourself out of sitting around, lazing around, waiting for inspiration and looking out the window or at your phone, you can set yourself a potential reward or a punishment for yourself. And if you get it done, you get to reap the dividends of that reward for your efforts. And if you don't, a hefty, self-created punishment awaits. An example is YouTuber Thomas Frank. He once talked about how he used a potential punishment to force himself into waking up early. He set an automated tweet to go out at a particular time in the morning every single day. And to prevent this embarrassing tweet from going out, he had to wake up, open his computer, and turn it off manually. Now, you might think that's a bit extreme, but it worked for that person at that time. Now, what could you learn from this, and how can you apply this same idea to your life? If you've tried all of these and you still can't seem to get that task done, maybe it's time to start considering delegating the task to someone else or just not doing it at all. Because at the end of the day, no matter how hard we try, there are just some things we don't want to do. And it's better to accept that and move on than try and force it and remain stuck and feel a sense of shame. Hope you enjoyed this video and click here to watch another just like this.